What's up guys, it's Alex the Magician here, and in this video I wanted to do a quick overview of the secondary skills in Heroes 3. This video is going to be mainly for newer players who are not entirely familiar with all of the skills and don't necessarily know which skills they should prioritize when they level their hero. So if you are familiar with what the skills do and if you know what you should prioritize, you can go ahead and skip this video. There's not going to be anything useful for you here. But if you are looking for information and maybe a guide on how to level your hero and what you should prioritize, keep watching. There's going to be some useful information for you here. One of the things I'll mention is that I will be discussing this as it pertains to player versus player play, and heavily towards the Jebus Cross template as well. So certain skills, for example, like pathfinding, may not necessarily be useful on other maps, but on Jebus Cross, it can be pretty useful. So just keep that in mind. All right, I'll just go through these one by one in the order they're in. And for the skills that are mostly useless, I'm not going to talk about them much. I'm just going to say they're useless and move on for the sake of not making this video too long. So the first skill that we have here is Archery. Archery is a good skill. It's not going to be your top priority. It will be maybe like medium, high priority after you get some of the more important skills like Earth Magic, for example. The only but with the Archery skill is you need to have ranged units. So at expert level, it's going to give you plus 50% to the range damage that your units do. So obviously, if you don't have any ranged units, it's not going to be that useful. If you do, if you have Cyclops as your main stack, for example, or one of your stacks, and especially if you have something like Golden Bow or Sharpshooter's Bow, then this skill is quite useful. Again, you don't want to prioritize the skill over something like Earth Magic, but it's going to be pretty high priority if your main stack is going to be ranged units. So then we have Ballistics. Ballistics is mostly useless. The only use that you can really get out of it is if you get into the final battle and you have to actually attack your opponent in the castle. Then you will have first move because you get control of the ballista and it goes first, even if your opponent has a higher speed unit. And that gives you the opportunity to cast magic and potentially get the upper hand in the battle. So that's really the only use of it. Otherwise, it's pretty low on the priority list. You're not that happy to actually get Ballistics as a skill. But if you get something like Ballistics and the other choice is Eagle Eye, then yeah, you want to get Ballistics. So the next one is Diplomacy. Diplomacy is a little bit interesting because it used to be banned, but now it's not, and you can actually use it. However, you have to pay a lot of money to get any creatures to join you. That's because they changed it in the latest big update of Horn of the Abyss. So now you can actually use it, but it costs a lot of money. It can be useful in the late game when you take Dragon Utopias and get a bunch of army from the center or something like that to join you, but it's certainly not going to be a priority early on. Eagle Eye, mostly useless, lets you learn spells in battle. I've never really seen it be useless, so you don't want to take it. You just don't. Same with Estates, mostly useless. You can have it on side heroes because it gives you gold, but definitely not on your main hero, mostly useless. Leadership is a pretty good skill. Leadership is something that gives you morale. At expert level, it gives you plus 3 morale. So especially if you have lots of different fractions and you have negative morale because of that, leadership is going to help. So, and if you're fighting with army and not necessarily depending on magic, it's also going to help more because your army getting morale is always good in big battles in the final fight. But as far as priorities go, I would say it's like medium. So you definitely don't want to prioritize leadership over something like Earth Magic or even like offense or something. All right, the next one is Pathfinding. Pathfinding is one of those situational skills. It's mostly useful, but it's useful in certain scenarios. So for example, if you're playing something like Fortress, which gets really big penalties to movement normally, then that's really useful. Or Tower also gets penalties, that's useful as well. And in playing Jabba's Cross, it's going to be useful for any fraction when you get into the center, when you get to the desert, because the desert also has large movement penalties. So if you don't have something like wings or the pathfinding boots, it's a pretty good skill to have. Definitely not the highest priority. I would say it's somewhere around medium. Probably put it above leadership, but below something like archery, certainly below earth magic and logistics. Okay, the next one is luck. I would say this is low to medium priority. It's a decent skill. The expert level is like like leadership. It gives you +3 to luck, but it's not a high priority. It's not something. It's nice to have in battles, but it's not something that you want to prioritize even over pathfinding. So I would say I would even put it lower than leadership on the list of priorities. The next one is Mysticism. Mysticism is actually regarded as kind of a bad skill most of the time. However, in certain situations, it can be pretty good. It allows you to recover additional mana per day without like using the well or actually being in a castle. At expert level, you recover an additional 15 mana points. So if you're playing with a mage hero, somebody who really needs mana and depends on mana, this can actually be a pretty useful skill because it allows you to recover additional mana, which means that you may not need to spend time to actually refill your mana in a town or something like that, and you can still do some fights next turn. So when I'm playing some hero like Luna, I actually kind of like Mysticism. Certainly not top priority, but somewhere around medium priority. But if you're playing a warrior hero for whom magic is not that important, then yeah, this skill is not really something that you want. All right, navigation is something we're just going to skip. Most of the time when you're playing against other players, you don't really have much water. So this is something that increases your movement speed or movement points on water. And most of the time that's just not a factor. Necromancy, that's something that's only available to necromancers, so it's a good skill, of course, but most of the time necromancers come with it standard, so at expert level you just get more heroes from each battle. It's a good skill, but not a factor if you're playing anything else besides necromancy. All right, then you have logistics. It is a good skill. It has been nerfed. It used to be a lot stronger than it is now. At expert level, you get 20% extra movement. However, that is still helpful. I would say that it's one of the higher priority skills after something like earth magic and offense, or maybe fire magic if you're playing something like Luna. Logistics is still a good skill to have. At expert level, when you get additional movement, it is going to help you. It's going to help you chase down your opponent. It's going to help you move more. It's going to help you do more in one turn. So this is still a pretty high priority skill, I would say. Next is scouting. Not the best skill for your main hero. Pretty decent skill for your side heroes, for sure. Because when you're in the center and you're scouting, you want to see as much as possible. It just increases your scouting radius. You do want to take it if you get an offer of something like scouting versus Eagle Eye, or scouting versus Estates, or scouting versus Ballistics. Scouting can still be okay on your main hero, but generally you're not going to be scouting with your main hero. So if you have side heroes with scouting, that is a decent skill to have. Usually not on your main hero though. But it can certainly make a difference when you get to the center, when you get to the desert in Jabba's Cross, for example, because then you can see more and you may be able to see more high-value objects like Earth Tome or something like that you wouldn't have been able to scout if you didn't actually have scouting. All right, next you have Wisdom. Wisdom is a good skill. It allows you to learn spells at expert level. It allows you to learn level 5 spells. But generally, mage heroes start with it, And for warrior heroes, it may not necessarily be the highest priority. It's still a good skill, and after you level things like earth magic, you may want to take wisdom. It all depends on the situation. When you take Pandora boxes and you have expert level wisdom, that does help, because then if you get a box that's all magic or level 5 magic or something like that, you'll actually be able to learn those spells. There's nothing worse than taking a really high value box and finding out that it's empty because you don't have wisdom. So wisdom is good. Just depends on the situation. Generally, mage heroes will start with wisdom, so you don't even have to worry about taking it, but it's not a skill that you want to prioritize as a first skill. Usually, mage heroes will have something else like earth magic or maybe fire magic that they want to prioritize first, and then you can get wisdom. All right, next we have the magics, the 4 elements: fire, air, water, and earth. So I'll talk about all of these at the same time. Basically, earth is the most important one. Earth is like the top tier skill that you want to have with warriors or mages. You always want to have earth magic, because with expert earth you can cast mass slow or mass shield. Slow is a really great spell. It's going to help you in fights, most fights against the computer. And then also at expert level, you can resurrect, you can summon a lot of earth elementals, you have implosion. So earth magic is basically better than the other 3 combined. So leveling earth magic is generally going to be your top priority. When you actually start, you want to get earth magic as quickly as possible, and you want to level that to expert as quickly as possible, except for a few different situations. The other one I'll talk about is fire magic, and that can be an exception in some cases. So for example, when you're playing Luna, she's going to prioritize fire magic in the early game. You really need advanced fire magic right away, because that gives you a 3-hex firewall instead of a 2-hex one, which really helps. And with Luna, you're really depending on the firewall in the early game and throughout most of the fights with NPC creatures. So on turn 1 or turn 2, like if I level Luna and I get a choice of getting advanced fire magic or earth magic, I would still take fire magic. But in most other cases, just about every other case, I would still level earth magic before. And in other cases, if other heroes get offered earth magic and fire magic, you definitely choose earth. Fire magic can also be useful for things like Armageddon and summon fire elementals, and also Berserk, which can win some games. I've seen it win some games even at the high level. But still, usually you prioritize earth magic before that. Air magic, I would say, is a little bit better than fire, because it does give you things like mass haste, it gives you chain lightning, it gives you fly and dimension door. So if you get offered air magic, you usually, if you're not something like Luna, you want to prioritize that over fire magic. But definitely less than earth magic. So earth magic is still the priority. Air magic can be good, but you usually want to level it after some of the other skills. Like even if you're leveling logistics, you probably want to get logistics first and archery or something like that, and then get air magic. And water magic is mostly useless. You don't really want it. There are only a couple of spells that are good. Summon water elementals that can help you if you have no other summons. And prayer. Prayer is a good one. So at expert level, you can cast mass prayer. Other than that, though, water is definitely the worst element, and you're not that happy to actually get water magic. All right, the next one that we have is Scholar. Scholar is decent, it's good on side heroes, usually not your main hero. Scholar at expert level allows you to teach other heroes level 4 spells. So in combination with heroes like Alamar or Jadid, who know Resurrect, or even Deemer, who knows Meteor Shower, or Solmir, who knows Chain Lightning, it can be a good skill if you want to teach your main hero that spell. but you usually do not want to have Scholar on your main hero. All right, next we have Tactics. Tactics is a good skill. Tactics allows you to actually position your units in a fight before the fight actually starts, as long as you have higher tactics than your opponent. So if you both have expert tactics, then neither of you gets to do that. But this really helps in fights against creatures, like ranged creatures. If you have faster units, you can actually reach them in one turn instead of 2 turns. It also helps you protect your ranged units like Cyclops or something like that. So this is a good skill. I would say it's definitely lower priority than something like even Logistics, definitely lower than Magic, maybe somewhere around the same level as Archery. I would say Archery, Tactics are close to the same level of priority. All right, then you have Artillery. Artillery is not that useful except for a situation when you have a hero like Jeremy, who actually specializes in a cannon, because artillery also affects the cannon. So if you do have Jeremy, then it's a pretty decent skill to have, because the cannon at a high enough level, when Jeremy's, let's say, level 15 or 20, his cannon with the artillery skill is going to do a really good amount of damage. Like I've seen games where the cannon does like 1000 damage with that. For other heroes, it's not going to be as useful, so usually you kind of want to avoid the skill, but in situations where you do have Jeremy and your cannon, you have that cannon specialty, then yeah, it's a decent skill. Certainly not top priority though. It's definitely not something you want to prioritize even over things like earth magic, air magic, archery, tactics, so you do want to get it eventually, just not right away. All right, the next one is learning. Learning is mostly useless. It allows you to get more experience when you, fight monsters or get Pandora boxes or treasure chests or something like that. Not really something that you want. It's usually not something that you want to waste a skill slot on. All right, next you have offense. Offense is a good one. Offense is actually something at expert level that raises your attack hand-to-hand combat to 30%. At expert level, it's 30%. So it's a good skill to have for both warrior heroes and mage heroes. Even if you're going to depend on magic, a lot of times you're still going to be using like summon elementals or something like that, which is still going to be pretty helpful. So offense is still going to be pretty helpful for you. You do want to prioritize it probably higher than archery, definitely lower than earth magic, depending on who you are. If you're prioritizing magic, like with Luna, fire magic and earth magic are going to be top priorities. But if you do get offense, you want to take it, because for mages, it's not very common to get offense. So it is a good skill. It's one of the top tier skills. I would say offense is probably one of the skills that's just a little bit lower than earth magic as far as the tiers go. So then we have armor. Armor is kind of same as offense, but only it raises your defense, but only by 15% at the highest level, at expert level. It is good, not necessarily top tier. I would certainly prioritize it lower than offense, maybe around the same level as tactics and archery. So kind of medium high priority. Certainly after you level things like earth magic, tactics, maybe fire magic, logistics, maybe even after archery. There are some cases where it's better, like when you have Tazar, who specializes in armor, and for him, it's actually going to do more, a lot more, because he gets a bonus per level. So with him, that may be a higher priority than for others, but I certainly would still not put it above like Earth Magic, even if you are Tazar. So then you have Intelligence, which raises your maximum spell points. At expert level, it raises your maximum spell points by 50%. It's pretty good, especially if you're playing a mage hero and you really need as much mana as possible. It's also decent in combination with Mysticism, when you can recover more mana. So I would say this skill for mages is probably around the same level of priority as offense. For warrior heroes, it's not quite as high of a priority. You may still want to take it, just because warriors don't get a whole lot of spell points, normally. So with intelligence, that raises their spell points, their maximum spell points. So it's a good skill. I would say somewhere around medium high priority. I would prioritize for mages. It's around the same level as maybe logistics, offense, probably higher than things like archery, definitely lower than things like earth magic and fire magic if you're Luna. For warrior heroes, I would probably prioritize that lower than tactics and offense, but still higher than something like pathfinding, probably. So next we have Sorcery. Sorcery is not useless, but it's not necessarily great. At expert level, it allows you to do 15% more damage with your spells. So it's not a skill that you really want. It's kind of low, like low medium priority, definitely not a high priority to level. It's certainly better than something like Eagle Eye. And if you're a mage and you get offered something like the sorcery or artillery, I would choose sorcery, of course, or even like sorcery over scouting, probably choose sorcery. But certainly not a skill that you really, really want, and certainly not a skill that you actually want to prioritize. All right, next you have resistance, and this is, well, actually it's interference now. This is the old picture. Now the picture looks like a sun being kind of eclipsed by the moon. It is a pretty good skill. It is situational. It's going to be higher priority if you know that your opponent is maining a mage. At expert level, it gives your opponent minus 30% to their spell power. So it's something that is definitely not going to be higher priority than something like Earth Magic, but it's something that can actually win you games, especially if you combine it with anti-spell power artifacts and things like that. So at the most, if you have interference and you have all of the interference artifacts, you actually can give your opponent minus 75% to their spell power. And I have won games like that before. So it's definitely not a priority early on, but if you get it in the later game or kind of mid to late game, then you do want to take it. And even if you're fighting against a warrior hero, it still will be useful because a lot of warriors are also going to want to get magic when they get to the center and stuff like that. So magic is still going to be a factor usually in the final battle. So this is a pretty good skill. I would say certainly lower than offense, tactics, certainly lower than earth magic, lower than archery, but in the later game when you get offered interference, then yeah, it is something you want to take and it is something you want to level. And the last one is first aid. Not going to talk about it. It's pretty much useless. It allows you to heal more with the first aid tent. Not something that you really want. Of course, if you get a choice of first aid and Eagle Eye, you want to choose Eagle Eye. But overall, you're not very happy to take that. Okay, well, that's pretty much it for the overview. Hope you guys found this video useful. Hopefully it didn't, it wasn't too boring and it didn't take too long to actually describe all of this, so you guys actually listened to all of it. So if you guys do want to see more Heroes 3 content, I actually do stream live on Twitch every day around noon European time. So if you guys want to check that out, I'll have the link in the description below. You can follow me so that way you'll be notified when I go live. And also feel free to subscribe to this channel so that you actually get notified when I release new videos. I usually release new videos on different strategy tips for Heroes 3 almost every week. So thank you guys for watching and stay tuned for more videos.